Hello everyone, welcome to our PTV Visum webinar. Topic today is the use of the Scenario Manager in Visum and also the possibility of distributed computing. My name is Manuel Galster from the PTV Visum product management team, and I will guide you through this webinar that should take about 45 minutes. I do hope that you can see the screen and, as important, that you can hear me. You can raise questions if you have a question using that question tool on your screen. I will try to answer it, but most likely at the end or after the session, not during the session. Let's have a look at the agenda. It's a rather small agenda. I will give a brief overview of the elements that we come across. There are just a few slides. Most of the time it will be a hands-on demonstration. I will go through an example, and at the very end I will show you how to use distributed computing. So let's get started with an overview of the elements that we need. First and most important element is a project. When working with Scenario Manager, we are working with a project rather than just a version file. The project keeps the whole structure together. Attached to a project is a base version. This is a version file, and it could be the current state or the current year of your model. It serves as a reference for changes in the network, in the demand, or whatever, and it's stored as modifications. So a modification, which we see here, is a measure in your network that you want to evaluate. It is stored in a modification file that contains the differences against the base version. You will see later on what this means. Of course, you can create as many modifications as you like. Next element that we need is the scenario. A scenario is the base version plus a combination of modifications. And of course, you can set up as many scenarios as you like. When all scenarios are set up, we can start the calculation. But first we have to define what is to be calculated, and therefore it needs a procedure. This can be either defined in the base version or, and this is more recommended, in separate files. And then we just allocate the different procedures to the scenarios. Right, so this is the only bit of background I'd like to give to you, and now I would just like to start at the example. The example follows widely the example that comes with your installation. So you have all the files available and you can do a self-training afterwards. So this is my example here, example network, and I will create two measures. One of it is I would like to build a new piece of road, a new bridge somewhere here, and also I would like to increase the demand by 10%. Okay. That's the slideshow so far. I will now switch over into Visum and start the example from scratch. So I start with a completely empty blank Visum version. So first step we have to do is to set up a project. So I go to the menu File, Scenario Management, and set up a new project. So it's asking for a file name. In my example, let's just call it webinar, and it's asking for a base directory. This is the location where the project is stored. Let me just get this location here. Right, and then it's asking for the base version. This can either be an already loaded version file. In my example, there's no version file loaded, so I have to choose from an existing file. So this one will be my base version. So I select this one here and confirm with OK. It takes a few seconds now, and it comes up with this control board here. And during this session I will go through all these different elements of this control board. Before I do that, let me just first point you to something that happened in the background when the project was actually built up. So I gave it a name, webinar. When I enter this folder, you see there are several more folders here. At the moment they are all empty, but they will be filled up during the session. This file here is the base version. It is a copy of the original base version. You could open this one here, but you should not do it. You will get a warning. I show you in a second how you can do changes to your base version. This one is a database. This contains all the metadata, and actually you should not be opening this one here. The same applies to pretty much all these folders here. Actually, you should have a look at them only when you have a good reason. I show to you how to deal with all elements without having the risk of making any damage to these files. One exception is this folder here. I will just copy across some files to here. You will see later on why this is. So, but now I would like to go back to my control board and start explaining all the different elements. Well, when working with Scenario Manager, you work only using these functions here. So you will not start editing something here in the background or editing something here. Everything is controlled by this control board here. First element I'd like to show to you is this one here. This is a log. This is just kind of a diary. You just create a timestamp and you track down the changes that you are doing. So for example, I just start the project. It is helpful when you have a large project and many steps and you just don't want to lose any information. Right. So the next button I'd like to show to you is this one here. It's called Edit Base Version. And this is if you want to do changes to your base version. There could be reasons for it. There could be errors in your base version or something has changed. So if you want to change it, you just enter this button. It is loading the base version, and this dialog here gives you the signal that you're now allowed to do changes or to edit the base version. So just in case, if you want to add a piece of road, I'm not going to change this. I'm not going to save this. But if you think this is a reasonable change to your base version, you could now just finish it and it will save in the base version. I will cancel it in a second, but just to make you aware, there's another option here in the middle, and I come back to this option later on. This is very important. So I just cancel and get back to my original control board. Here's another button, Edit Project Directory. Hopefully most of you are aware or are using our project directory system. This works quite similar with one little difference. We have here a basic folder. So in this case, we have one common folder where all the files can go in. It's called Shared Data. So this is the default setting. You can change this to folder to the particular scenario. Let me just do this for the first one, for the version file. But basically, this system works similar as you are used when you're using project directories. Okay, here's another box. I skipped that for the moment. I come back to this later on. But now I'd like to start with my actual example. I was saying I would like to do two changes, two modifications, two meshes in my network. So I switch over to the tab Modifications. It's empty, so I just create a first one. And the first one was I would like to build a new bridge. So I call this, code BR, description, new bridge. There's another field here. This is just optional. If you have many modifications, you can give them certain group numbers and group them accordingly. In my example, it's not necessary. I have only two modifications, so I just leave this blank. So this is asking what is your modification based upon. In my example, I can only base it on the base version. Of course, you can also base your modification on another modification. In this case, you would get a dependency. One modification is dependent on another one. So I just choose base version. It's opening the base version again. Just have to wait until this dialog comes up. and then I can start editing my modification. And in this example, I would like to build a new bridge somewhere over here. I have prepared some graphic parameters just to make it a little bit easier. So the bridge should go from here to here. Problem is, at this end, there's one link and there's no node in between, so I first have to create a node over here. So I do this by splitting this link, split it somewhere here, create a new node, create some new links, and that's it. Now I have a node on this end, and I can start creating a link. So I just follow this polygon, kind of. I give it a certain link type. For example, just choose 36. And that's it. Get back the original graphic parameters, and you can see there's a new road. This is a bridge. And when you're happy with your modification, you can just finish, and the modification will be saved. This was the first modification. I will do another one. So number 2, and this time I will increase the overall demand. So I give this as a code demand, say 2020, demand 2020. Leave the group blank again. And again, I will base this on the base version because this modification is completely independent from the other one. They have nothing to do with each other. So open the base version again. And then I switch over to the matrices. And I'm interested in matrix number 100, which is for car. And I will, for any reason, I know that in 2020 there's an increase of 10% from everywhere to everywhere. So what I do is I just increase the total matrix by a constant factor of 1.1. Okay, so demand has increased. I will close the matrix and I save this modification. So I have 2 modifications now. And before I go on, I would like just to show to you what you can do if you would like to find out what does this modification actually consist of. Imagine you have many modifications, or this project was handed over by a colleague or a client or whatever, and you would like to find out what are these modifications. Well, the description, okay, but it's not always clear enough. Where's the new bridge? What is it actually? So before I come to this, I would like to go back to these folders that have been created in the background. And one of these is filled now. If I go enter the modification folder, you see there are 2 files. And these are the 2 modifications. Let me just open one of these. It's a text file. And it looks very similar to our network file. Slightly different. So there's a plus and a minus symbol. So this is only the difference of this modification against the base version. And I was saying, actually, you better not opening these files because there's just a risk to damage them. So if you want to find out what these modifications are, we have a better possibility. We have a better tool. So I have selected the first one and choose this button over here and just arrange these views in a better way, and also change the graphic parameter again. So down here are listed all objects that are part of this new modification, for example, nodes. And when I click on these objects, you see that it synchronizes with the network view. So obviously there's one change in the node, and if I click on the links, obviously here are new links and turns and so on. And you see not only the objects, if you open these ones, you see all the details, all attributes of these modifications. And so there's no risk of losing any information. All information are available, and you can just track them down if you're not sure what these modifications are. Right. So 2 modifications. Next step I would like to do is to create scenarios out of these. So I switch over to the tab scenarios, and I would like to do 4 scenarios. out of these two modifications. So I start with the first one, and scenario number 1 is actually not a real scenario because this one is just the base version, or I just call it do minimum or whatever you'd like to call it. Do minimum. Yeah, not right, doesn't matter. So this will be my reference when I want to like to compare a future scenario against the current state. So I'm not going to set in any modification here. Scenario number 2 is the new bridge. So I call this new bridge. And as a modification, I choose modification number 1, which is the bridge. Scenario number 3 is the increased demand. So I call this demand 2020. And I choose as modification number 2, demand 2020. And scenario number 4, this is a combination of my modifications. So this is what happens if the bridge is built and the demand is 2020. So I call this bridge 2020. And as modification, I choose both modifications that I have. Right. So 4 scenarios are set up. Now we could actually start running these scenarios. Question 4 is, what do we actually want to calculate? At the moment, it's using, if you look at this column here, procedure from the base version. And I can tell you in the base version there's no procedure set up. So you could set up your procedures in the base version, but you should do that only if you are sure that you want to run all the scenarios with always the same procedures. I think it's more recommended to set up single procedure files. So I switch over to this tab, procedure parameter sets, and I create a first one. So I would just like to do an assignment. So I give this the name assignment. I'm only interested in PRT, only for highway. So assignment PRT. I would like to use the currently loaded one, which I know is empty. So it's opening the empty procedure, and I can start to set up certain procedures, which I do here. I start with initializing the assignment. The next one I do is the PRT assignment. My reference object is I'm only using demand segment car. And I leave this equilibrium assignment just as it is, as I'm not worried too much about results. I just leave it as it is. And I will insert another step. And this has to do with the analysis that I would like to do afterwards. Afterwards, I would like to do some calculations, and I would like to do calculation only on links that have a volume. So I have prepared a filter file, and I'm using this one. I read a filter, and I'm using this filter. This only activates links that have a volume after the assignment. And then I do another step. And this one has also to do with analyzing results afterwards. And hopefully many of you are aware that we have some tools to create reports. So for example, this one here, I will create an assignment report, PRT. And I have to do some setups here as well. Don't want to go too much into detail. I would just like to see all the assignment statistics. Then I have to select an object link, and I would like to set up a attribute, which is the volume capacity ratio on the link. So I'm looking for the attribute volume capacity ratio. Okay. Typically, I'm interested in an average, and I'm interested only in the average of links that have a volume, which means I exclude all railway lines and whatever. I also want to see grouping analysis, and I would like to plot them using a chart. and I also only have to give it a name, an output name. Well, I call this, well, let me just call this assignment. It will be an Excel file, and that's it. So, and this is my procedure sequence. I close this and save it, and then I switch back to my scenarios and change these procedure parameter set from 0 to 1. Obviously, you can set up as many procedures as you like and give it to different scenarios, different procedures, if this is interesting for you. So we have set up modification. We have defined 4 scenarios. We have created a procedure parameter set. We could now start running these scenarios, but let me just do one step before, and this has also to do with analysis afterwards. For this, I switch back to the basis setting and come to this box that I have skipped earlier. This one is called Scenario Indicator, and this serves to set up scenario indicators for a global, for a network-wide analysis of your results. So, as an example, I'm interested in the total vehicle kilometers traveled on all links. So I'm looking for the aggregation function sum on link and look for the attribute vehicles kilometer traveled, PRT, and add this. And at the same time, I'm also interested in the average saturation also on the links. This is the same information that I get from the report, just as a comparison. So I want an average volume capacity ratio, and because I'm only interested in links that have volume, so no railway lines and so on, I'm choosing the aggregation function average active and look for the attribute volume capacity ratio, PRT. Add it to here, close it, and I have these 2 attributes created. They're not really nice. They're generic names, but we can rename them. So here, for example, I just call this vehicle kilometer, and this one I call, well, V over C, volume over capacity. So they are just easier to identify. Then I switch back to the scenario tab and add these 2 new attributes to my list. So they're just over here, which means after the scenarios have been calculated, I will get the results of these 2 indicators just straight away. Okay, so now we are pretty much there. Now we can start running these scenarios. I do this by selecting all of them. So I've selected all 4 scenarios, and I'm choosing this button here and just confirm with OK. And what you can see in a second, hopefully, is that, and this is according to my settings, not only one vSUM instance will open. You see there are 4 vSUM instances open, which means all of my 4 scenarios are running in parallel. I can do that as long as when your computer is not strong enough to run them actually in parallel. So just need a little patience. You see it's getting the assignment. If I change to this view here, you have control what's happening at the moment. So blue means it's calculating, and here you see the progress. So 2 of the scenarios have already the add-in, which is the report. 2 of them are still assigning. So 3 of them are finished with the assignment. Just waiting for the last one. Okay, it's creating the reports. And you see number 1 is finished already. This box switches from blue to green. Green means everything is fine. Let's wait for the last one. Right. So all 4 scenarios are calculated. Let me just have a look at this end here. These are my 2 a scenario indicator that I have created, and this one gives us, well, it gives us the first results actually, but it gives us also an idea, are we running in the right direction? Are the results sensible? And let's have a look, for example, at number 2, scenario number 2. This is total vehicle kilometer traveled, and it's slightly less than scenario number 1. And the same applies to the volume capacity ratio. There's also a drop from 1 to 2. Well, we have created a new bridge, so this is what we expect. When we build a new bridge, we want a drop in the saturation. Otherwise, something would be wrong. So this makes sense. Scenario number 3, it was an increase in the demand, and of course the vehicle kilometer and also the saturation increases. And then this is the combination of an increased demand and the new bridge, and it drops again. So yeah, these results make sense. I cannot say that these are correct, but they make sense, and it gives us a first indication of our results. Let me check what our reports are doing. So I find them in these folder scenarios. As you can see, for each scenario a folder has been created, and within each of these folders you find one version file. Each calculated scenario creates one version file. You have to keep this in mind if you have a very large model, and if you're running 50 scenarios, this means you have 50 version files. So using scenario management helps you a lot, but it does not save disk space, just to make you aware of this. So and also you find this Excel sheet here. This is the report that I have created in the procedure. This is for scenario number 2. Here are some statistics about my assignment. This is the convergence. You see the conversion curve over here. But I'm more interested in these results. So we had the volume capacity ratio on the links only active. You see an average 117. This is the same result as the Visum has calculated, hopefully. This is here split on different type numbers, link type numbers, and you can see all these also in these plots here. So here for each used type number or link type number, the saturation. So you see type number 13, a very high saturation, type number 10, which is my motorway, rather low. So this is just one example of an unlimited number of different possibilities you can do for analyzing your results. I just close this and get back to my results here. So we have the results on a global level, on a network-wide level, but of course this is not everything that we want to see. We want to see more details. We want to see what changes on one particular link. So you and your client wants to see, when I do build a new bridge, where is more traffic and where is less traffic, as an example. So we have to go one step further, and I switch over to this tab which is called Comparison Patterns. So what I want to do, I want to create an attribute which is the difference between one and another scenario. And so this is a quite neutral formulation, because I don't want an attribute which is scenario 2 minus 3. I just want to create an attribute which is one minus the other. So that's why it's called comparison pattern. And I will just create one scenario comparison pattern. Just need to give it a code and a name. This one, for example, is for volumes for PRT. So volume PRT. It's asking which object and which attribute are you interested in. I want on the links the volumes, so I just choose this attribute, volume PRT. Of course, you can do as many as you like. And then you can set up your comparison pattern. You can do this for a graphic parameter or a filter or a list layout. I think most important is probably the graphic parameter, so I focus on this one here. And I also want try to use a graphic parameter file that I have prepared already. Let's see if it works. So it's this one here. I just show to you what this one is actually contains. So it contains a bar, a link bar, and the attribute of this link bar is something that you can see here. If you have a close look to this one, you see something like a scale symbol, and it's called vol_prt. This is exactly the name of the comparison pattern that I have just prepared. So this one is an attribute which is, for example, the difference from one minus the other network, which is defined here. So close this one here, and when I'm happy with my comparison pattern, I just save it, finish it here, and then I can apply this pattern to any combination of scenarios. So for example, I would like to see what happens if the bridge is built compared to my current state. So which means I would like to compare the bridge with the do minimum scenario. I select these two and use this, well, this scale symbol here. I choose from the comparison patterns, which I have only one, and I apply this, and then we can have a look at the results. So I move this aside a little bit. So what do we see here? Well, we see red and we see green, and according to my settings, it means that red is more traffic and green is less traffic. And if you see here, well, there's a lot of red on the bridge, of course, because the bridge didn't exist in the current stage, which means there can only be red. So many people travel now over the bridge, and you see there's green on this side here. Obviously, there was a shift of traffic from here to here, which means these people are more happy now than these people. This is a display that everyone understands, that should be clear to everyone. Of course, there's only one example that you can do, so you can easily see what's the difference between scenario 2 and scenario number 1. Of course, more traffic here when the bridge is built. Let me give another example. For example, what happens in the year 2020 compared to today. So I apply this comparison pattern again, and I don't want to anticipate, but there can only be one color. I have an increase of 10% from everywhere to everywhere, which means there can only be red everywhere. There cannot be green on some links. And just finally, this combination, what happens in the year 2020 when the bridge is built, well, it looks quite similar as comparison, the first one that I did. Well, we have a lot of red here, many people traveling here. We have red all over the place because there's an increase in demand, but still we have some green over here. Well, we have an increase in demand, but still a new bridge, which means in total there's also still a shift from here to here. So hopefully it becomes clear a little bit what we can do. Again, I say it, this is only one example of an unlimited number. You can use any objects and any attributes to apply these comparison patterns. Let me just make you aware of one kind of issue over here. You can see, well, here's a lot of red because there's a new bridge, of course. But how about here? This road here existed already before. So why is there such a big increase of traffic? Well, the road existed before, but in terms of visum, the road didn't exist before. If you remember, in the first modification, we have split this link, which means we have now two new links here, which means what you see here is not the difference between scenario 1 and scenario 2. This is the total traffic in the state when the bridge is built. You might say this is not really nice. I don't want to see this. What could you do, or what could we have done to avoid this? Well, we could have done one thing. We could have done the change or the split of this link already in the base version. Let me just do that and go back to the basic setting and editing the base version. So let me just do that just like before. I edit this link here and I split this link somewhere here and create a node over here. So if I would say now I finished this one, I would run into trouble a little bit because I would like to apply modification number 2 to this changed base version. And what would be happening, it would try to split this link which doesn't exist anymore. And for this reason, I was saying that we have this option number 2, which is called check and finish the modifications. And it's always recommended if you do changes to the base version, always use this option. So I do that. It's applying each of my modification to this new base version, and it's giving me this warning or this error here. It found an error in modification number 1. Of course, it's trying to split a link that doesn't exist anymore, and if you come to that point, you should discard the change unless you have good reason for it. So if you would like to do the split before in the base version, well, there's no other way than just removing this modification and redo it again. Okay, so where are we so far? We have come across pretty much all functions that we have. We have created modifications. We have formed 4 scenarios with this modification. We have created a procedure file. We run these 4 scenarios. We looked at the global or the network-wide results. We have created a comparison pattern, and we have applied these several scenario combination. So that's it pretty much. I would like to add 1 or 2 things. One thing is, on the modification, the example that I did is I always did a kind of a manual change in the network or in the demand, but there are other ways how to get modification. And one of them I would like to show to you. For example, if you have created for each scenario so far, or each modification, a separate version file, because you haven't used the scenario manager so far, so you have saved modification 1 as a version file, modification number 2 as a version file, and you would like to get these into my scenario, into my project. Well, that's pretty easy. I would like to give you one example. So I will create another modification, and I call this new zones. So the example is I have created a separate version file that contains several new zones. Just as an example, it's based on the base version. And now I can edit my modification, and what I do is I will just open that new version, which I've called new zones. You see here is obviously there are some new zones, and I save this modification, and that's it. So my modification number 3 consists only of the difference between one version file and the other one. In this case, the only difference is I have 3 or 4 new zones. So this is the way you have to go when you have saved modification or even whole scenarios as separate version files and you want to get them into your project as modifications. There is another way which I would just like to describe. You can also apply model transfer file if you have used them so far. So just create a new scenario, new modification, and apply a model transfer file and finish it. You will get an example for this if you do the example in the installation. It consists of 2 parts, and part number 2 has this option of applying a model transfer file, so you will get everything with the example. Okay, so now I have explained, well, not all the details, obviously. One thing maybe, as I was saying, each scenario, each calculated scenario is one version file. So of course you can use all the tools that we have to analyze a version file, like Flow Bundle, like isochrones and whatever. So what you can do is you can select the scenario you would like to analyze and use this button here, and it opens this scenario, and you can apply and print it or whatever you like to do. And if this is still not enough, if you would like to have this as an explicit version file because you want to give it to someone else, for example, you can also select this and use this button here, and this exports you this scenario as a version file. Okay, there's one last tab which I haven't touched so far, and this is this tab here. It's called Computation Nodes, and this has to do with distributed computing. So before I give you an example for this, I will get back to my presentation. I have one more slide over here. So, distributed computing. Typical use case, and I was mentioning it before, when you have a large project and you have like 3 or 4 scenarios and you're short of time, of course, we are always short of time, then and you would like to run them in parallel, but your computer is not strong enough to run them in parallel. At the same time, you have in your office or whatever several vSUM licenses. And typically overnight, not everyone is using his computer. So overnight you would like to use the computers and the licenses of your colleague, for example. So what you can do, you set up your project and all your scenarios and everything here on your computer, and you have another computer here. Of course, you need a vSUM installation and a valid license for that, and an additional little program is called Scenario Calculation Server. It's just a little program. You have another one, and you have this calculation server program where you can do up some setups. You can exclude certain times for using another one on your computer. Say you would like to let them use it only on the weekend or during the night or whatever. So you have these available, and what you do is you send over your base version plus modification plus procedure file, which is your scenario then. The scenario is calculated on this computer and here and here, and once it's finished, it sends back the whole package of results back to your computer, which means there's no need to hand over single files or whatever from one computer to the other. You just control it from here, send the scenario to here and to here and to here. It's running, and sending the results back. So a very convenient way, and without any risk of losing data, losing information or whatever. I would like to show it to you and hope that it works. What you see here, this black one here, this is just another computer which is here somewhere in the office. It's connected to our network, obviously. And when you see here on the computation node tab, you see there are 2 computation nodes. Number 1 is my computer. It's called localhost, and number 2 is this computer in the network. So I can use these 2 here. I switch back to the scenarios. I would like to see the external computer here in parallel. So what I do is, for example, I would like to rerun scenario number 3 and 4 again because something has changed or whatever. So I start the calculation and change these 2 scenarios to my computation node here. So I just switch it here. That's all I have to do. Just press OK. And what you can hopefully see in a second is, vSUM opens. You can also see here the blue bar means it's calculating. You see the progress. It's loading the version file. It's loading the version file over here. It has already started the assignment. And from my experience, as this computer is much faster than mine, it should be very quick. So both of them are doing the assignment at the moment. See it somewhere here. So first scenario, assignment finished, second finished as well. add-in reporting is created. Number 3 is finished and number 4 is finished. You can see it was rather quick. And you have all the results that we had before, so there's no difference from calculating it on your computer or on another computer. So I think a very convenient way of saving time when you have several scenarios on rather large projects. Okay, that's it pretty much what I wanted to say about Scenario Manager. I hope you found it useful, and I hope you find it inspiring actually to use it. If you have any questions about what you have seen, you can use the chat tool. I will try to answer them. But before I close the session, let me just point you to some more information, such as some more webinars. For example, the next webinars are about COM scripting. And because this is such a comprehensive topic and important and interesting topic, we have split them into 2 parts. One of is the introduction, another one is the advanced level. So this is in April, if you would like to see that. Even more information, well, check our website. You can order a trial version if you haven't one so far. You can book trainings. You have all the contact details. And if you look in your Visum installation, you see many documents. We have an overview documents about the latest news. We have examples which you can go through. One of them is about scenario management. We have tutorials and so on. So a lot of things to discover there. And if this is still not enough and you want to even give a closer contact to us, why not joining one of our user group meetings? If you hurry up, you can travel to Bogota to our user group meeting for Latin America, which is next week already. If this is too short notice, why not traveling to Berlin? End of May, there's our Shaping Transportation Conference and User Group Conference. Great event. Highly recommended to go there, so hope to see you there. And yeah, that's it from my side. Yeah, hope we see and we hear again. Hope you will join another webinar, and I wish you a good day and just say bye-bye.